All right, let's go. Okay, so going to be going through some content. Super excited. Thank you guys for joining us today. With that being said, I'm going to get right into it. Okay, let's go. So, um, just a little bit about me. 17 years I've been at UWM. I've been doing mortgages for over 20 years. Okay, and when I first started learning about mortgages, everything was about the sale. The sale. Okay, the phone call, the application, building rapport, what are their goals, everything along those lines. And so when I started about the first, I would say probably the 8, 9 years, everything was about handling objections, making sure that you're perfecting the phone call. Well, about 2000, I'd say maybe 15, what we started to do was we started to focus on digitalizing the mortgage process. Okay. And so that's when you would have seen UWM install applications such as like One Click AUS. That's when we really started to put a focus on e-sign. As we continue to roll things out, the e-sign tracker, everything that you can include to digitalize the mortgage experience. We went really into IT from like I would say 2015 to today. Okay. With me saying that, the reason why I bring that up is because about a year and a half ago, I started thinking, okay, well, if that was phase two, what's going to be phase three? And to me, it became AI. I became getting like obsessed with trying to figure out like how I could use AI to be more efficient, to have better strategy, and obviously make sure that I try to be unique in what I'm doing. And I think that AI is going to be that differentiator for everybody as they move forward. Okay. So now this slide right here, time. Okay, I want to break this down. This is something that, as it started to evolve for me, it became like the number one focus of exactly how I could use it to my advantage. Okay. I figured like how could everybody knows when I ask for feedback, when I ask for participation, everybody knows AI is important. You got to put it in your business. It's coming, right? Um, but what ends up happening is as you do your research, as you sit in presentations, you find out like you're telling me this is important, but I don't end up getting any use cases. Okay. And so as I started using it, um, I'm very big on KPIs. I feel like I was a big part of UWM's KPIs and pushing sales and pushing effort. And so I'm really big on numbers. I believe mortgages are always elementary math. Okay. And so when I would write an email using AI and send that out, what I would find is like, not only did I do it faster, but I believed at the end of the day I had a better product, right? And then I started asking myself, how much time did I just save on that? I probably saved at least 8, sometimes 15, depending on the length of the email, 15 minutes per task that I would do inside of AI. So then I start to like build goals around that. And one of the goals that I set out for myself early on was I wanted to cut 2 hours a day using AI. I wanted to use AI to my advantage to get back 2 hours a day through specific tasks. Okay. Now let's just map that out. If I'm 2 hours a day and I go 5 days a week, I've just bought back 10 hours of my time. Now let's go for a month, right? I just bought back 40 hours of time. So while other individuals not using AI are working 4 hour work weeks, I'm working a 5 week work, a 4 week work week month. I'm working on a 5 week work month. Okay. So such a tremendous advantage. When you pace that out over a year, all of a sudden I'm getting 3 additional months of effort just by the fact that I'm using AI to help me be more efficient, to build strategies and whatnot. Okay. So everything that I'm going to talk about from these slides moving forward is about the fact that we have to figure out ways to use AI to our advantage with time. Some people might have more resources. Some people might have more money. They might have a bigger team, whatever the case is. But you know what we all have? We all have 24 hours in the day. And so you as an individual, how you can use it to your advantage is cutting time. Okay. So that's everything that I want you to focus on while you're using AI, while you're watching things is like, what can I implement this to and how much time is that going to earn me back? Okay. So now let's go through like today's journey. I'm going to just be quick with this one right here. And what I want you to think about is um, LLMs, AI, prompt engineering, practical applications. I think practical applications are such a big deal. Every time that we put one of these trainings together, me and the team, we always focus on practical application, because if I show you a cool tool, but then I don't tell you where it actually applies, you're not going to get the value out of it that we possibly can. We're going to go into personalization of AI and then target avatar. Now, what I want to make sure everybody understands is while we're going through this journey today, I'm going to be very brief on these things. I'm gonna hopefully add some great value for these, but I want you to understand that week 2 through 5, as you see based on today's journey, that's going to be where we're going to take time and we're going to go very in depth on whether it's LLMs or prompt engineering or practical applications, personalization, building your avatar. Okay. So if you feel like, well, I didn't get enough there, that's why I need you to make sure that you attend week 2 through 5 so that we can partake and we can do it as like almost like a workshop and we can get a little deeper there. Okay. So first thing that I want to talk about, and this is something that I want to touch on briefly before I get into my slides. Myself personally, I've sat through what I would consider hundreds, maybe thousands of hours at this point over the last year and a half of presentations, of webinars about AI. And the one thing that I hear, I'm a diligent note taker, right? Like it's just something about me. I take excessive notes. Um, and what I believe, the reason why I do that is I believe that if you and I are talking and you're telling me something, I'm probably going to retain about 70% of that content. Okay. But if I actually take the act of writing down that note, I believe I like sear it in my mind and I believe my retention will go to 90%, right? So I'm a diligent note taker. And what I found was as I sit through these presentations and these webinars, I'll sit through an hour, maybe sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 2 day webinars. And what I notice is that on my notepad, like I don't walk away with shit. Like they really don't give me anything of substance. They don't give me anything that's actionable that I can include into my business the next day. A lot of it is like a lot of cliches. It's like, AI's coming fast. You got to make sure you implement it in your business. You're not going to be replaced by AI, but the LO that's using AI will be the one to replace you. And it's a lot of like cliches about like, okay, I understand it's important and I got to add it to my business, but you're not giving me anything tangible. And so I've always told myself that if I were ever to get an opportunity to speak in front of whether it's 30 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, that I would make sure that what they walk away with is a lot of value and a lot of things that they can implement into their business. So I hope that the things that I'm going to go through over the next 30 minutes, you'll be able to like get off of this webinar and implement into your AI and into your business immediately. That's a very, very big deal. So please judge me harshly on that. I want any kind of emails, any kind of feedback on things that I could do better. But that's my goal every time that I get to present in front of people is like, I believe that the things that I'm going to talk about, it'll make you better instantly on AI. Okay. So let's talk about this right here. Um, so I like to tell stories. I like to like paint pictures. Okay, I think it's just a way for it's how I understand things, and I believe it's how salespeople understand things. And so I wanna paint the picture about LLMs. Okay, so typically this is what I ask everybody in the audience. I'll say like, who uses ChatGPT, right? And what I find is it's predominantly, I mean, it's 85, 90% of the individuals in the class will raise their hand, right? And then what that tells me is that like 10, 15% of people don't want to participate in my survey, right? So predominantly everybody's using ChatGPT. Okay. Now, what I end up finding is I end up finding that when I go and I say, okay, so that's great. They're dominating. Who's using Claude? Okay. And what I want you to understand is large language models, they are what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT has done such a phenomenal job of making their brand the product. I hope that made sense right there. I tried to slow that down as much as possible. They've done a phenomenal job of making the brand the product. So let me give you an example like Kleenex. You don't, you say, hey, can you pass me that Kleenex? But technically, what you're asking for is, can you pass me that tissue? But their brand just dominates so much so that that's what you know it as. Okay. So when people say, oh, I'm going to look that up in ChatGPT, what you're doing is you're actually looking that up in an LLM. Okay. And there's hundreds and hundreds, eventually going to be thousands of different LLMs, and they all provide different value. And so that's what I want to touch on. And so when I ask individuals like who uses Claude, it ends up being about 5 to 10% of the audience uses Claude. Okay. And then I'll say like who uses Perplexity? And it'll be 5 to 10%, but it'll be completely different users than Claude. Okay. Then I'll say, okay, who uses Grok? No politics aside, right? Um, it'll end up being another 5 to 10% of users, and it'll be a completely new batch of users. Okay. And then Gemini has been doing phenomenal. I've literally been able to, I've been blessed to watch over like let's say the last 6 months, how much Gemini has grown. It's gone from what I would consider maybe 10% to like now it's probably more towards 20% because of all the initiatives, all the tools, all the things that they're actually putting together. So it's growing. Now, the reason why I went over these LLMs and I talked about the brand replaces the product is because I want you to understand this. If the most important thing that you walk away from today is you try another LLM, you've already obtained new value. You've already increased your efficiency and your knowledge about AI just by knowing that there's other models that are out there that do a great job. So I want to explain something. This is how I paint the picture. So let's say today, all of us on this call, we have a job to do. We all show up to the job site. Okay. The job that we're going to do is we're going to build a home. Okay. We're going to build a home. Now we all, before we go there, we're like, let me grab all the tools that I think are necessary to build this house. And we all show up, and just like based on the survey numbers that I asked, everybody shows up with a hammer, right? We all use ChatGPT, right? But we all know that there's a bigger increase of tools that are needed to buy a house, right? You need your measuring tape, you need a screwdriver. I'm sure you need plenty of other tools. I'm not so construction based, so I'm not sure exactly what other tools you guys would find important, but you get my point. If we all show up with a hammer, we're only going to get so far. There's only so much the impact that we're going to make by having a hammer, right? And so what I ask is I ask individuals to look at LLMs as a toolbox. And each and every one of these LLMs provides a different function. They all are peak level or industry leading at different situations. Okay. So what I talk about like with ChatGPT is it's like, let's say it's like the Swiss Army knife. They score the best across the board. Like the overall average ChatGPT does the best. Okay. But now let's talk about like Claude and Perplexity. Those are two that I usually combine them together because their focus is the same. It's deep research. Okay. So I call them like the valedictorian of LLMs. They're the smartest large language models that you can possibly use. So I give the situation of like, have you ever been using ChatGPT? And when you're making these requests, you feel like it's not giving me enough. I want more detail. I want more data. I want more substance. Okay. If you were to take that original prompt that you were running in ChatGPT and run it into Claude or Perplexity, you'll end up having to say at the end of that, can you dumb this down? Right? Claude and Perplexity are like the smartest LLMs. They are extensive. It's like executive. It's like Kelsey level style reporting. It's tremendous substance, and they are catching on fire because people are finding out that they want more from their LLM than what ChatGPT is giving them. Okay, so if you ever feel like I'll give you a use case. I love use cases, right? 2026. We're in February. We're still early in the 2026. Let's say that you use ChatGPT to do your 2026 business plan or your 2026 goals, right? I bet if you were to take that project that you did in ChatGPT and you were to pull that out and you were to go over to Claude or Perplexity and run that through that program, you would end up with a substantial amount of improvements. It would be a lot more in depth. The criteria and the deep research that it would do would be phenomenal. So anybody that did that project, which I bet there's a lot of people on here, that's why we're successful, is because you did that project. Please take like a moment and pull those prompts out, throw them into Claude and Perplexity, and see what your finished product is. It's going to be light years ahead than what ChatGPT gives you. Now, let's talk about Grok, for instance, right? So Grok is a LLM that lives on the social media platform X. Okay. And so think about that life of that LLM. It literally sits there and listens to people argue and try to convince each other that you're wrong and I'm right all day long. Okay. So when it comes down to marketing, persuasion, it's not my opinion, it's facts that they say that Grok performs better than all other LLMs based on that criteria. So let's talk about the use case for Grok. The use case for Grok would be I want to do a 30-day social media campaign. I want to work on my email or my SMS campaigns for my CRM. I want to work on maybe some mail out flyers that I'm going to do. On a mail out flyer, you only get a very small amount of opportunity to convince somebody that you're the lender that they need to choose for their next transaction. Well, Grok performs the best at those easy, important persuasion situation. A borrower emails you on like, "Hey, I'm really hesitant. I don't know if I should move forward. I'm hearing things about the market. I don't know about rates, and maybe I just want to sit still right now." Grok will perform the best on replying back to that email and giving that borrower the substance, the data, the emotional feeling, the empathy to convince that borrower that like now is the time, that you're the person that they should move forward, that you've done hundreds of these transactions. Okay. And then Gemini is not so much the chat conversation style LLM. Gemini is really building a toolbox. Okay. So if you do any research on Gemini, which is Google, and all the tools that they're building with AI, the easy win that I would tell you is like to just check out Notebook LM. Okay. Notebook LM is phenomenal. And what I would say, like a tremendous value add that you could add for real estate agents is if you were using Notebook LM to go on to like Zillow and take some of the listings and just take that Zillow link and put it in a Notebook LM and tell it to convert you into a podcast. You can convert it into a 7, 10, 12, 15-minute podcast. It's always a man and a woman that are having the conversation. And that voice AI on Gemini, which is what we use here at UWM, it's the best voice AI in the industry. It's like it's very emotional. It sounds so realistic. So if you were to take a listing agent that you want to earn business from, take their listings, drop the link in there, and generate a podcast through Notebook LM, tremendous value add. If I was an agent, I'd have that sign out in front, and I'd have a QR code. So as people drive by, they could hit that QR code, and that would lead them directly to that podcast. And that podcast would sell them for 7, 10, 15 minutes on why that house is such a important, benefit, or what about the bedrooms and bathrooms, or the historical aspects of the city. So it's phenomenal. That's what Gemini is doing, not so much conversation. Okay. So if I could ask one thing from everybody in this call, the most important thing that I would tell you is you have to use other LLMs than ChatGPT. If you try them, you're going to get better finished products. It's just so important. Okay. So that's my whole thing right here. Hopefully that's value that you've added. All of them have a free platform, so you can try and test and see which one you like out of all of them before you have to commit and worry about the 10, 15, $20 savings. If you guys, I see some hands being raised, go into the Q&A. If you guys got anything that you want to follow up at the end of the call, put it into the Q&A. Make sure you're upvoting the ones that you maybe agree with, and those will be the ones that Mitch bring to me at the end of the call. Okay. So let's move on to the next one. The next slide I want to talk about is prompt engineering. Okay. So about 2000, maybe 2010, there was this like gold rush of individuals going to college, and their focus was they wanted to be a coder, right? I want to be a coder, right? Um, Now that job may have already ran its lifestyle. Now there's vibe coding, which is AI coding. And what I would tell you is like an experienced coder in a 40-hour work week, vibe coding can probably get that same amount of code written in like 4 hours, right? So now what you're going to find is the most experienced coders are going to be people that oversee vibe coding to make sure that the code is authentic and legit. Okay. Now, the reason why I tell you about coders and I say that is because I believe the next gold rush of an industry opportunity of job market is going to be in prompt engineering. Okay. And why I say that is because every single company, whether it's corporate, Fortune 500, small entrepreneur, they all are trying to stuff AI into their business. They should be at least. Okay. And here's something that once again, I'm gonna go about painting the picture. Okay. So I want you to understand that like prompting is what determines your finished product. So I had a conversation with my father-in-law. He comes over and we get it. We love to have these debates, these long, in-depth conversations. And he says to me, I think AI is the devil. And I said, okay, so we're off to a good start since I teach AI. Let's hear, where's that coming from? And he said, well, these kids, they're not going to have to learn anything. They're just going to be able to type in AI and they're going to get the details back. And I said, respectively, old man, I said, they probably said the same thing about books when they were invented, you know? So I want you to understand that really it's not an advantage if it's being used wrong. right? You you and I get given a problem. We both get an LLM that we get to use for our research. If you go in there and you type in a bad prompt and I type in what I would consider a good prompt, I call it a master prompt, the finished product that I'm going to turn out is going to be far superior than what you're going to turn out. So like hitting him with that and making him understand that it's not just anything you throw in there is going to give you the same results. That's not the case at all whatsoever. It was a big eye opener for him. I think I won that one right there. But this is something where I believe that I can take an elementary LLM AI user and we can go to like middle school. We can sometimes get into high school level by just changing your prompt. I'm going to tell another story. I like to tell these stories because I feel like this is how I can put it down. We've all had two different styles of leaders, bosses, managers, so whatever you want to call it. Okay. And one boss is like, "Hey, I need you to get this done." And you're like, "Well, I have some follow-up questions." And they're like, "I don't have time for you. Go get it done." Okay. And you go out and you try to accomplish that task. And you come back to that leader and you're like, "Here's your finished product." And the leader immediately says, "That's not what I wanted. You didn't do it exactly how I wanted. You didn't handle that situation how I wanted. You didn't give me the content that I wanted." So that's one scenario. Now you have another scenario where you go to a leader, maybe you're a new hire, today's day one, and your leader says, "I need you to do this for me." Okay. And then you said, "Well, I have some questions." And they said, "Okay, so here's what I want. I want you, this is our potential outcome. Here's some things that you should watch out for. Here's how I want you to build rapport. Here's what we know about them and our history of this relationship that we have with this person." And you give them what is called context. You give them like examples. You give them what you hope for the output of the situation. Now, if I'm the employee in both those circumstances, I want to work with leader too, because he gave me much more foundation. She gave me much more detail on exactly what I'm doing. I bet that my finished product's going to be a lot better for that second leader than it would for that first leader. So how I always try to explain it is like LLM is a new person hired day one, and you're their leader. And they're going to give you back the final output of how detailed and how much instruction, how many examples, and what your plan and your strategy is based on the prompting that you give to that LLM. So if you find yourself like, "I feel like I'm using AI, but it's just not giving me a good enough product at the end," well, that's because you're being a bad leader. You're not giving it all the details that it needs to be able to give you the finished product that you're looking for. Okay. So, like, if right now I were to just hang up this Zoom call and we were to leave and you were to go get into LLMs and you were to try different LLMs, and while you're using those LLMs, you were to be a better prompter, I could hang up this Zoom call and I believe that immediately everybody on this call just got better at AI. Okay. That's how substantial that those two pieces of information are for your improvement on the final product that you're getting. Okay. So just one little last touch on this before I move forward. Um, let's talk about chain of thought. So I want you to remember back to the days that like you first started getting into uh, LLMs or AI and ChatGPT, whatever the case is. You probably went along the lines of this, like, "Hey, can you respond to this email?" And then it gave you a final product, and you're like, "That's great, but like, can you make it a little longer?" And then they answered and said, "Here you go." And then you were like, "Actually, can you personalize it? I'm speaking to Susan." And then now you're getting I want you to understand there's this thing is called AI amnesia. And that comes from like the multiple back and forth. And I'm sure you probably got to a point where you got so far down going back and forth with them where you were like, "Hey, I don't know what happened, but you've gotten completely off the rails here. Like you're not giving me anything of what I originally asked for." Well, that's because we went back and forth too many. And LLMs are getting a lot better. Like it used to be like a very drop curve, and it seems to be flattening out right now. But what I want you to understand is when I prompt, I go for zero shot or few shot. I try to give it as much substance as possible at the beginning. I'll end up starting from a solid foundation, and then I'll have two or three adjustments to that prompt, and then I have the exact finished product that I want. And so that's what I would ask you to do is understand that like the more conversations going back and forth, you're increasing your opportunity for that conversation to go off the rails. But if you give it a tremendous amount of substance at the beginning, like sometimes I'm weird. My wife will come in the room and she'll be like, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm like, "AI, you know? And that's because I hit the voice button and I'll say, like, "Hey, I have this project I'm working on, and here's what I want you to do, and here's the final output that I'm looking for. And, I want you to ask me questions that maybe I'm not giving you details for. Or I want you to think about the things that maybe I haven't thought about in this process of what I'm trying to do. And I'll have like a three, maybe sometimes 5 minute conversation of just like, what are my goals? What am I trying to accomplish? Where did I get this information from? Who is my audience? And so try to stuff it. So what I always try to like to do is I like to say like, whenever you're in there and you put your prompt in and you're about to hit enter to submit that prompt, what I want you to do, you guys thought I froze, didn't you? I didn't freeze, but I do that awkward moment right there because I want you to remember that the next time that you're going to submit it. I want you to stop. Don't submit that request. I want you to add more substance. Is there another example? Is there more output? Is there more context that I can add to this prompt? And I assure you, if you go with that mindset before you just start submitting things into ChatGPT, into Grok, into Claude and Perplexity, you'll end up getting a better finished product. Okay. So I got tons of examples when we get to week 3 for prompting that will run you through these use cases and we will show you actually like live demos of exactly what kind of finished product that you're going to get out. Okay. So I'm going to keep it moving here. So on the practical applications, I could go through each one of these things and add value, but there's one specific one that I love to speak on, and that's client communication. I believe that this is probably one of the majority of the times. I always try to put myself in your situation of when are you using AI? What are you using it for? And I believe client communication is probably like the majority, like the largest chunk that we can improve. Okay. And so what I typically find when I ask, because I love to ask and get feedback and then figure out how I can maybe improve on what they're doing, is they'll say a borrower will send me an email, hey, Terry, I wanted to do this transaction, but I'm a little hesitant. My uncle told me the market's going to change, values are going to drop. They give you that email, right? And you'll just rip that email and you'll drop it in ChatGPT and you'll say, reply to this email in a professional manner, whatever the case is. Now that you send that over to the borrower, now I have this thought process when it comes to AI that if with AI you do something twice, you're not doing it right. You should be using AI to do it one time and it's done. It's automated. It's done. So let's say that you send that email to that borrower and the borrower reads your email and then they reply back to you and they say, "Yeah, but we still have these concerns and I appreciate you addressing that, but we're still not sure because of this." Now, what do? You got to rip that email and you got to put it into the box and you got to say, reply to this email. Here's how they responded. We're doing it twice. Remember the first slide that I talked about was time. If you got to keep ripping these emails and having ChatGPT reply, you're not saving time. So now I'm going to tell you the prompt that I would use with client communication to when I'm handling these situations. I would say, I want you to reply to this email that I've provided you. Now, I want you to optimize. I love the word optimize whenever I'm using AI. I want you to optimize this email reply for the borrower not to reply back to me. I want them to feel like I've done hundreds of these transactions that have felt exactly like you feel. And then I want you to provide data. I want you to provide the research that needs to be said to say that the market's not going to fall, that house values are not going to come down, that rates are going to come down. And that gives us the opportunity to refi later on. And you don't want to be in the purchase market when rates drop because then you're competing with the larger group of people. Like, I want this person to feel like I am the right choice. I want you to also use empathy so that they understand that I've heard everything that they said, but this is why it's not factual and we should move forward with this transaction right now. Send. That's my prompt that I would do for client communication because what I want is I want to reply to the borrower and I want that communication to cease immediately. I want the borrower to reply back and go, all set. Thanks so much. I want them to go to their spouse and be like, I knew I was tripping. Like, look at this email Terry sent me. It's got everything that we just addressed. Look at these stats. I didn't know these stats. And this is why my uncle is wrong. Like, I want it to immediately cease to exist with that client communication. And that's where we win. That's where we get our time. That's where we convert those applications. And so client communication is a big one. Don't go back and forth, back and forth. We're not really getting the advantage of AI. Let's cease to exist a conversation. Let's optimize it so the borrower doesn't reply. I believe just using that, I've gotten feedback from a tremendous amount of LOs and real estate agents that come out here that use that technique that say it's been a vast improvement to their communication and the borrower either commits or they were never going to commit to begin with, but they actually get to the bottom line of it right away. Okay. So now The next subject I want to talk about is personalizing your voice. Okay. And this is something that I believe is going to take us to the next level. And I can't wait to do this with you. I think this is going to be week 4, okay, of our process. And that this would be a must attendance. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because I know for sure, and I get this from feedback that I get from people all the time, is you'll sign into Facebook and you'll be scrolling through people's posts, and you know when you'll see that person's post and you're like, that's not you. Like, I know you. I talked to you. I've grown up with you. Like I just was at the bar with you last night. You don't talk like that. Like I feel like in that circumstance, you're sort of catfishing your borrower, right? Like they think this is who I'm working with, and then they meet you and they're like, that's not that individual, right? And so I believe that the next largest improvement from us as users of AI and then how we put it out into the market will be this specific topic right here. And we personalize it. And what I mean by that is this. There's some individuals that I follow in the mortgage industry, like Luke Shankula, for instance. He does such a phenomenal job. And when you speak with him, okay, and then what ends up happening is I'll read his Facebook post, and you know what happens when I'm reading his Facebook post? I picture his face and him saying it to me because it's so authentic. His Facebook post speaks to exactly how he would speak if me and him were having a conversation. And that's where, as LOs, as even real estate agents, this is where we're going to take it to that next level where it's not like AI slop that we're turning out. It's like, no, like it speaks just like me. And so I'm going to go through a demo where we actually hit the phone call. And what I do is I do like a 15-minute podcast style interview where it asks me questions about myself personally. And at the end, the finished product will be I want you to give me a master prompt of like who I am, how I speak, the words I use, the tone I use, how I tell stories, as you've seen from this call so far, how I like to paint the picture, how I like to tell stories. I like to try to emphasize and sell with that category. When you do this exercise with me in week 4, it's going to change all of your output and the wording and the styling that it gives. And so now what'll happen is you'll save that and then you'll say like, "Hey, give me a 30-day social media campaign and I want you to say it in my voice." And it'll go back to that original prompt that we just built, and all of your social media campaign will be in your voice. It'll sound much more personalized than what it is. Hey, I want you to reply back to this email that the borrower sent me, but I want you to do it in my voice. I want you to build this text message campaign and I want you to do it in my voice. I want to work on my webinar copyright or on my website copyright, but I want it to sound in my voice. It will take your AI and the way that your finished product is to a whole nother level. So please make sure you attend week 4 because that's when we're going to get really in depth on personalizing your voice, and it'll change the whole output of all of your content that you give out there. So please, that'll be a big one, and I can't wait to get to that one with you. Um, so now let's move to week 5. This will be like what week 5 will actually be, and I'm trying to give you guys substance of like how I've obtained that these will be impactful trainings as we move forward in this 5-week course. Okay. And so I'll ask the audience, I'll have a room of 300, 500, 400 real estate agents and 100 LOs. And I'll say, can I ask you guys, who's your ideal client? Who's your avatar? Right. And I get such a consistent response. It's not funny. So I want you guys to think about this right now. If I were to ask you, like, who's your ideal client? How would you respond back to me? Okay. Like, if you just think about that for a moment. Okay. What I typically get is I get individuals and they respond back to me and they say, "Oh, I'm a first-time home buyer." They're a first-time home buyer. "Oh, I do a DSCR. I'm an investor." Or, they'll go like, "Oh, I'm a VA. The VA is my avatar." And when you're talking to a VA loan officer, like that's all they talk about. They don't talk about shit but VA, right? Because that's their client. That's their focus. That's who their avatar is. Okay. And I love it because that means that they're dominating the market. They found their niche and that's all they go for. And that's phenomenal. The luxury and jumbo avatar, that's where people are all of a sudden like, if they're not paying attention to me, they're all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, talk to me. I want to." Everybody's in on some luxury and some jumbo. Now, the reason why I get deep on this is because I have this saying, and I want you to hear me and I want you to finish what I'm going to say because when I don't ask questions that I don't know the answers to. So I want you to finish this saying as I go through it. When you build your marketing to speak to everybody, you end up speaking to, and I know for sure you're all sitting at home on your desk, you're sitting in your office, you're on the car listening. Everybody said you speak to nobody. Okay. And so that's what I feel is sometimes the marketing and like us selling ourselves online or in ads or whatever the case is, we're trying to cast such a wide net that what you end up doing is you get nobody. Okay. Or you get the lowest bottom feeders of the applications that are being submitted because they're just like, I'm just desperate. I want somebody to help me out here. Now, to me, I go, okay, if that's the case, and when I ask this question 1,000 times, I get the same exact answer every single time. We have to be deeper on that. We have to be deeper. And so what I did was I went into ChatGPT because even though I showed you a ton of other LLMs, I always get the question, which LLM do I use? I use ChatGPT just like you guys. But then there's those specific circumstances that I'll jump over to the other LLMs and I'll use them to give me a better finished product. But what I said to ChatGPT was I said, I teach these classes. I hear from these real estate agents. I hear from these loan officers. I ask them who's their avatar, who's their ideal client, and they typically give me a 3 to 4 word reply: investment, first time home buyer, VA. I said, I want to build something that gets tremendously deeper. And so that we can be, instead of hitting the dartboard, we can hit the bullseye of our clientele. Right. And I said, give me back some substance, some content that I can actually do. And this is what it gave me back. And it gave me back an age range, income level, family status. You could read all those that are on the screen right now. Now, so think about it. So if I were to say, hey, build me a 30-day social media campaign for first time home buyers, you'll get some product. You'll get a good finished product. This goes back to prompting that we talked about before. But what if I were to say, hey, build me a first time home buyer 30-day social media campaign and my age range is 25 to or 28 to 35 and their income level is 65,000 to 100,000 and their family status is newly engaged or potentially newly married with 0 to 1 kids and their occupation is maybe an entry level position or whatever the case is, right? And all of a sudden I start to build the demographics, the preferences, the objections, and I build my marketing material for first time home buyers. Can we all agree that that second prompt that I would do, where I would include all of this information of this is who the avatar is, that I would get a tremendous improvement on my finished product? Okay. And so that's what I want you to understand. When we go into this, I'm going to show you a ton of different avatars. I'm going to show you a ton of different use cases that we can actually use these avatars. And I'm going to show them to you in real life of like, if this is what you're saying, hey, build me something for first time home buyers, this is what you're getting. But look what kind of improvement we get when we add all of this thing in here. So what I would really hope if I were you is that you just took a screenshot of this screen. And you're not going to wait till week 5 for us to get into Avatar. You're already going to start to put these things in place because your social media content, your email replies, your SMS, your ads, your CRM information that it's sending out will be much, much more improved by just including a little bit more detail. Okay. So that right there is like a little bit of a recap of all the things that we're going to touch on these week 5. If there's projects that you're working on, you want me to take a look at, I love getting involved in this stuff. This thing has really invigorated me after 20 years of being in the industry. It's made it really, really fun for me. So if there's anything that you want my input, I'll make sure to get back to you. And until then, I'll see you next week. Thank you guys very much for your time, and I hope you guys have a great day.